Hello and welcome to another episode of A Fresh Perspective here on Heavenward Thinking. Today we're continuing on in Luke. We're going to be looking at Luke chapter 22, verses 1 through 6. So I'll read it and we'll get right into this week's discussion. Now the festival of unleavened bread, called the Passover, was approaching, and the chief priests and the teachers of the law were looking for some way to get rid of Jesus, for they were afraid of the people. Then Satan entered Judas, called Iscariot, one of the 12. And Judas went to the chief priests and the officers of the temple guard, and discussed with them how he might betray Jesus. They were delighted, and agreed to give him money. He consented, and watched for an opportunity to hand Jesus over to them when no crowd was present. What can we see today with a fresh perspective in this passage?
Oh, again, I think that we need to understand this concept of sometimes we can be used by the enemy to turn people over to him. Right? I think we also need to understand that there are people who are bent on getting other people. Right? So the fresh perspective is, listen, the enemy is constantly plotting to get you. He uses people to do that. So therefore, there are people who are plotting to get you. We don't like to think that way, right? We don't like to think that there may be somebody sitting somewhere right now talking about how to take us down, right? Or how to get us, or how to be used. That there are people who could be sold out for 30 pieces of silver to betray us, things that we've said, right? So again, you've confided in somebody, and you're out in a bar where you shouldn't be, like we just read last week, and all of a sudden you've had one too many drinks, and you start being used by the enemy to betray something that was said in confidence. Now that can happen with or without alcohol, just for the record, but it's that kind of a thing. The enemy wants us to be in places where we shouldn't be, so that he can use us to betray other people.
Yeah, I think it's something that should open our eyes when we look at sections like this and see how the enemy works, and how he uses division and how he uses people to accomplish what he wants. And in this section, he's trying to get Jesus. He's trying to take out the Messiah, Jesus. He's trying to stop God's plan. Unknowingly, he's going to be used in God's plan to carry out God's plan perfectly. And God has a plan incorporating all of us, and it's amazing to see that. But in this moment, he's trying to just eliminate Jesus. And so he uses these chief priests, these teachers of the law, who we have seen all throughout Luke, that they hate Jesus. They just cannot stand Jesus. They can't understand what he's teaching. They don't like the people he hangs out with. They don't like what he's preaching. They're afraid of the people who are going after Jesus, and how he's getting these massive crowds turned toward him, and toward something that pushes them kind of to the sidelines, and how he's rebuked them time and time again. And so they're going to find a way to get Jesus. And then at the same time, we see that going on. We see Satan using Judas, entering him, it says in verse 3, using Judas, who then goes and betrays Jesus. He offers to the chief priest, the officers of the temple guard, how he could betray Jesus. They give him money, they pay him off to do it, he consents, and he watches for an opportunity to hand Jesus over to them with no crowds present. So we see two groups of people. We see a group of people, the chief priests, teachers of the law, plotting to get Jesus, and then we see Judas being used by the enemy to try to get rid of Jesus. And again, like you said, it points in our own lives. We should be understanding. We have an enemy who uses the same tactics against us. He's going to stir people up to plot against us. And so we need to be prepared and understand that, and also not give in to the temptations to try to get people ourselves. And maybe when we feel like, I really want to get this person, we should take a step back and realize the enemy could be using us in that moment. Let's not give our lives to him. Let's not be used by the enemy. Let's allow Jesus to use us, and not give in to that temptation.
So in this passage, right, we are reminded of things. This is not the first time that the Pharisees, Sadducees, teachers of the law were trying to get Jesus. They have been plotting from minute one. The Bible, early on, they're plotting to get him. The problem is they can't get him when there's a crowd, because the people believe he's a prophet. The people believe in him. The people admire Jesus. So they are constantly trying to find a way behind the scenes to get to Jesus. We need to understand that same concept, right? That that the enemy isn't going to necessarily attack us in front of a whole bunch of people that can come to our rescue. The enemy is always looking for the behind the scenes conversations. Who can I use that will turn you over behind the scenes? First, we don't want to be like that where we're trying to do that to people, but we also don't want to be used like that. Wait a minute, if you're talking to somebody in such a way that you would not in front of a bunch of other people, there's a problem.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what is happening here. They're trying to figure out how to privately get Jesus. Right? That concept is so important, right? If you're having closed little meetings with people behind the scenes, that's a problem. You are no better off than the Pharisees. At any time, they could have accused Jesus and arrested him publicly, but they wouldn't do it because they knew that it wasn't the right thing to do, that they couldn't do it. So they were waiting for a private moment. I wish I could tell you that I haven't seen this before, but I've seen this a ton. I was talking to so-and-so. Well, wait a minute. Like, you weren't talking with this person? No, I was talking with... This is a constant problem.
Absolutely. I think it's all over the place in churches today, where we have people trying to go behind other people's backs, and we see all kinds of division that comes from these types of plots, that comes from people like the chief priests, people like the teachers of the law, people like Judas, who go behind closed doors, who go behind people's backs. They do things they know are sneaky and wrong. They try to be really secretive about it because they know it's wrong. Like you said, they know it's wrong. They know it's not the right thing, that if they did it out in public, it wouldn't be stood for, it wouldn't be allowed, it wouldn't happen. And so they try to force it in a secret way. And that's where we don't want to be. We don't want to have those attitudes. We don't want to have those actions. We don't want to have churches allowing that kind of behavior. We want to make sure that we root out that behavior, that we don't let the enemy get us, and that we don't go down those paths, those roads of trying to get people, trying to do things we know really we shouldn't be doing, that if we, like you said, if we were out in public, we wouldn't do. We should be living righteous, holy lives, not giving into the enemy. And I think this is a great passage that reminds us not to allow ourselves to be used by the enemy, but also then to be on guard against the enemy's traps and against the ways that he works and uses people to turn against us.
Yeah.
I hope that you've been encouraged and challenged by this, and that you'll join us next time for another episode of A Fresh Perspective here on Heavenward Thinking.